The phone buzzed against the marble countertop like a dying insect, its blue light cutting through the darkness of our kitchen at 2:47 a.m. I should have left it there, should have rolled over and buried my face deeper into the pillow that still smelled like his cologne. But something about the timing felt wrong, urgent in a way that made my chest tighten with inexplicable dread. 3 years of loving someone teaches you their patterns. Emmett never sent voice messages this late. Never sent them to me at all, actually. He preferred his words carefully typed, edited, perfected before hitting send. Control was his language, and spontaneity was a dialect he'd never learned to speak. My bare feet whispered across the cold hardwood as I padded toward the phone, my silk nightgown catching the moonlight streaming through our floor-to-ceiling windows. The penthouse apartment we shared overlooked the city's glittering skyline, a view that had once made me feel like I was living in a fairy tale. Now, in the pre-dawn darkness, those lights looked more like watching eyes. The message notification glowed. Voice memo from Emmett for 23 minutes. 4 minutes and 23 seconds. Long enough to contain a lifetime of secrets. My finger hovered over the play button, trembling slightly. Later, I would remember this moment as the last time I was truly innocent. The last time I believed that the man sleeping peacefully in our bed upstairs was the same man who had proposed to me 6 months ago on a beach in Santorini, tears streaming down his face as he promised to love and protect me forever. I pressed play. Emmett's voice filled the silence, low and intimate in the way that had once made my heart race. But he wasn't speaking to me. The words that spilled from my phone speaker were meant for someone else entirely. Someone who had apparently been waiting for this update, this report, this confession. Mom, it's working perfectly. She has no idea what's really happening. The wedding's in 2 months, and by then, everything will be transferred. The trust fund, the properties, all of it. She actually thinks I love her. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering against the marble with a sound like breaking bones. But Emmett's voice continued, floating up from the floor like poison gas. You were right about playing the long game. 3 years of pretending to be the perfect boyfriend, and she's completely under my control. The best part? She's so grateful for my patience with her anxiety and depression. If she only knew I was the one causing it. His laughter, that warm, rich sound I'd fallen in love with, now felt like ice water in my veins. I sank to my knees on the kitchen floor, my hands pressed against my mouth to muffle the sob that threatened to escape. Above me, I could hear the faint sound of Emmett shifting in our bed, probably reaching for me in his sleep, maintaining the illusion even in unconsciousness. The voice memo continued, each word a fresh wound. The medication switch was genius, Mom. Swapping her antidepressants for placebos has made her so much more dependent on me. And the gaslighting techniques you taught me? She questions her own memory now. Sometimes I'll move her keys or change her passwords, then act concerned when she can't find them. She actually apologized to me last week for being so forgetful lately. My entire body began to shake as 3 years of memories reshuffled themselves like a deck of cards, revealing a completely different picture. Every tender moment, every supportive gesture, every time he'd held me while I cried about feeling crazy or broken, it had all been calculated, orchestrated, a performance worthy of an Oscar. The inheritance from her grandmother is the real prize, Emmett's voice continued, oblivious to the fact that his intended audience wasn't the only one listening. $12 million, plus the estate in Connecticut. Once we're married, I'll have access to everything. Then we can stage the accident we discussed. Make it look like one of her episodes went too far. Everyone already thinks she's unstable. I've made sure of that. The word accident hit me like a physical blow. I doubled over, my forehead touching the cold marble as the full scope of his plan crystallized in my mind. This wasn't just about money. This was about my life. I have to admit, there were moments I almost felt bad for her. Emmett's voice took on a mock-sympathetic tone. She's so trusting, so eager to please. But then I remember what we're working toward, and it gets easier. Besides, she's served her purpose. The wedding will be beautiful. Her grandmother's money will pay for it, which is poetic justice, don't you think? I forced myself to sit up, to keep listening, even as every instinct screamed at me to run. I needed to hear it all. Every detail. Every confession. Because somewhere beneath the shock and devastation, something else was stirring. Something cold and sharp and infinitely more dangerous than the broken-hearted woman I'd been 60 seconds ago. I'll call you tomorrow to finalize the details about the prenup. Don't worry, she'll sign whatever I put in front of her. He trusts me completely. Poor little Natasha. She has no idea that her fairy tale is about to become her worst nightmare. The voice memo ended with a soft beep, leaving me alone in the darkness with the sound of my own ragged breathing. He'd said my name like it was a punchline to a joke only he and his mother understood. I stayed on the kitchen floor for what felt like hours, my mind cycling through disbelief, devastation, and finally, settling on something much more useful. Rage. Pure, crystalline rage that burned away the fog of manipulation and gaslighting that had clouded my judgment for 3 years. Emmett thought he was so clever. Thought he'd found the perfect victim in the grieving granddaughter who'd inherited more money than she knew what to do with. He'd studied me like a predator studies prey, learning my weaknesses, my triggers, my desperate need to be loved after losing the only family I'd ever known. But Emmett had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. As I finally stood up, my legs steady despite everything I'd just learned, I caught my reflection in the darkened window. The woman staring back at me looked different somehow. Older. Harder. More focused. The broken, manipulated girl Emmett thought he knew was gone. In her place stood someone he'd never met. Someone who had just inherited not only her grandmother's fortune, but her grandmother's razor-sharp intelligence and ruthless determination. Emmett wanted to play games? Fine. But he was about to learn that some games have consequences he never saw coming. I picked up my phone and saved the voice memo to 3 different cloud accounts. Then I walked upstairs to our bedroom where my fiancé lay sleeping peacefully, one arm stretched across my side of the bed as if reaching for me. I stood in the doorway for a long moment watching him. Tomorrow I would begin planning the most important performance of my life. I would be the perfect trusting fiancé right up until the moment I destroyed him. But tonight I allowed myself one last look at the man I'd thought I loved, memorizing his face in the moonlight. Because after tomorrow, Emmett Beckham would never sleep peacefully again. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening. The morning sun streamed through our bedroom windows with the kind of golden warmth that belonged in romantic movies, not in the bedroom of a woman who just discovered her entire life was a carefully constructed lie. I lay perfectly still, listening to Emmett's steady breathing beside me, my body rigid with the effort of appearing normal. Good morning, beautiful. His voice was rough with sleep as his arm tightened around my waist. The same arm that had held me countless times while I cried about feeling lost and broken. The same hand that was now trailing lazy circles on my bare shoulder had been systematically destroying my mental health for 3 years. I forced my lips into what I hoped was a sleepy smile and turned to face him. Emmett's dark hair was tousled, his green eyes soft with what I'd always believed was genuine affection. Even now, knowing what I knew, I could see why I'd fallen for him. He was devastatingly handsome in that effortless way that made other women stare when we walked into restaurants together. Morning, I whispered, my voice catching slightly. Emmett's eyes sharpened with what looked like concern, and I realized he was cataloging my reaction, probably wondering if I seemed more fragile than usual. More dependent. You okay, sweetheart? You seem a little off. His thumb brushed across my cheek with practiced tenderness. Did you have another one of those nightmares? The nightmares. Of course. Another symptom he'd probably been cultivating. Another sign of my supposed instability that he could point to later. I wondered how many of my episodes had been triggered by his subtle manipulations. A moved object here, a changed password there, a medication that wasn't working because it wasn't actually medication at all. I'm fine, I said, letting a small tremor creep into my voice. Just tired. I think I got up for water around 3 and couldn't fall back asleep. Emmett's expression shifted to one of gentle concern, but I caught something else flickering behind his eyes. Satisfaction. He was pleased that I was having trouble sleeping, pleased that I seemed fragile and uncertain. You've been having a lot of restless nights lately, he said, his voice taking on that careful, therapeutic tone he used when he wanted to make me question myself. Maybe we should talk to Dr. Reeves about adjusting your medication again. Dr. Reeves. Emmett's recommendation when I'd first started struggling with anxiety and depression 2 years ago. I'd trusted Emmett's judgment completely, never questioning why he'd been so insistent on that particular psychiatrist, or why he always insisted on coming to my appointments for support. Maybe, I agreed, snuggling closer to him and hiding my face against his chest so he couldn't see my expression. You always know what's best for me. I felt rather than saw his smile. I just want to take care of you, Nat. You know that, right? Everything I do is because I love you. The words that had once made me feel cherished now made my skin crawl. But I forced myself to relax against him, to play the part of the grateful, dependent fiancé he expected. I know, I murmured. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. I'm not going anywhere. Not going anywhere. Because he needed me alive and married to him for at least long enough to access my inheritance. After that, well, the voice memo had made his long-term plans crystal clear. Emmett's phone buzzed on his nightstand and I felt his body tense slightly. Probably work, he said, but there was something in his voice that made me think otherwise. I should check it. I lifted my head to let him reach for the phone, watching his face carefully as he read whatever message had come through. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and his fingers moved quickly across the screen. Everything okay? I asked, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. Yeah, just some issues with the Bryson account, he said smoothly, setting the phone back down. Nothing I can't handle. The Bryson account. I'd never heard him mention any Bryson account before, but then again I was learning that there were a lot of things about Emmett I'd never really known. You work so hard, I said, tracing patterns on his chest with my fingertip. I worry about you sometimes. Don't worry about me, sweetheart. I can take care of myself. His hand caught mine, stilling my movements. You just focus on getting better. On our wedding. 2 months from now, you're going to be Mrs. Emmett Beckham. Mrs. Emmett Beckham. The name I'd been practicing writing in the margins of notebooks like a lovesick teenager. The name that was supposed to represent my happily ever after. I can't wait, I said, and for the first time since I'd heard that voice memo, I was telling the truth. I couldn't wait for our wedding day. Because by then, Emmett Beckham was going to get exactly what he deserved. Emmett's phone buzzed again, and this time he couldn't hide his irritation. I'm sorry, babe. I really need to take this call. Why don't you go start breakfast? I'll be down in a few minutes. Of course, I said, sliding out of bed and reaching for my robe. Take your time. I padded downstairs to our kitchen, my mind racing as I went through the motions of making coffee and starting breakfast. Emmett's voice drifted down from upstairs. He was speaking in low, urgent tones, but I couldn't make out the words. Probably talking to his mother, discussing their plans for my destruction. As I cracked eggs into a bowl, I found myself thinking about Emmett's mother, Victoria Beckham. I'd only met her a handful of times over the past 3 years, and each encounter had left me feeling somehow diminished. She was a tall, elegant woman with silver hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. She'd been polite enough, but there had always been something calculating in the way she looked at me, as if she was appraising my worth. Now I understood why. She hadn't been evaluating me as a potential daughter-in-law. She'd been evaluating me as a mark. Smells amazing down here. Emmett's voice made me jump and I realized I'd been standing frozen at the stove, the eggs burning in the pan. Oh no, I said, quickly turning off the burner. I'm sorry, I was just... Hey, it's okay, Emmett said, moving up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. You've been so scattered lately. Maybe you should take one of those pills Dr. Reeves prescribed for your anxiety. The pills. The fake pills that were probably nothing more than sugar tablets, designed to make me think I was getting help while actually ensuring I got worse. You're right, I said, leaning back against him. I'll take one after breakfast. Good girl, he murmured, and the condescending tone that I'd once found endearing now made my teeth clench. I hate seeing you struggle like this. I turned in his arms, looking up at his handsome face with what I hoped was adoration. What did I ever do to deserve you? You existed, he said, cupping my face in his hands. You beautiful, perfect, trusting girl. You existed and you chose to love me. The words were poetry. They were also a confession, though Emmett didn't realize it. I had been trusting. Perfectly, completely, devastatingly trusting. Perfectly, completely, devastatingly trusting. But that woman was gone now, replaced by someone much more dangerous. I love you so much, I whispered, standing on my tiptoes to kiss him. Sometimes I feel like I love you more than I love myself. That's how it should be, Emmett said against my lips. When you really love someone, they become more important than anything else. More important than your own judgment, your own instincts. You trust them completely. Another confession wrapped in romantic words. Emmett was telling me exactly how he'd manipulated me, probably getting some sick satisfaction from my obvious devotion. I do trust you completely, I said. With my life. And I'll never betray that trust, Emmett said solemnly. I promise you that, Natasha. I will never ever hurt you. The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly that I almost believed he believed it himself. Maybe in his twisted mind, killing me for my money wasn't hurting me. It was just business. I know you won't, I said, smiling up at him with all the love and trust one could muster. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Emmett's smile was radiant, and for a moment I caught a glimpse of what he might have been like if he'd been a different person. If he'd been capable of genuine love instead of just skilled mimicry. Go get ready for work, I said, gently pushing him toward the stairs. I'll clean up here and then maybe do some wedding planning. I want everything to be perfect. It will be, Emmett said, his eyes gleaming with an emotion I now recognized as greed rather than love. Our wedding is going to be absolutely perfect. As his footsteps disappeared up the stairs, I allowed my mask to slip for just a moment. My reflection in the kitchen window showed a woman with cold, determined eyes. A woman Emmett had never met and would never see coming. I pulled out my phone and opened a new note, titling it Wedding Plans. But the list I began typing had nothing to do with flowers or venues or catering. Instead, I started documenting everything I could remember about Emmett's behavior over the past 3 years. Every time I'd felt confused or forgetful. Every time he'd been suspiciously helpful or supportive. Every time he'd steered me toward a decision that had ultimately benefited him. The pattern was so clear now that I wondered how I'd missed it. But that was the insidious nature of gaslighting. It happened so gradually, so subtly, that the victim never realized they were being manipulated until it was almost too late. Almost. Emmett thought he had 2 more months to complete his plan. 2 more months to drain my bank accounts and arrange my accident. But he was wrong about one crucial thing. He thought I was still the same broken, trusting woman he'd been systematically destroying for 3 years. I heard the shower start upstairs and knew I had maybe 20 minutes before Emmett came back down. 20 minutes to begin laying the groundwork for his destruction. I opened my laptop and began researching Dr. Dawson Reeves, the psychiatrist Emmett had so helpfully recommended. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Dr. Reeves had been sanctioned twice by the medical board for unethical practices, including prescribing unnecessary medications and maintaining inappropriate relationships with patients' families. The most recent complaint had been filed just 6 months ago by a woman whose husband had been paying Dr. Reeves to keep her medicated and compliant during their divorce proceedings. My hands shook as I read the details. The woman's story was eerily similar to mine. Mysterious onset of anxiety and depression, increasing dependence on her husband, memory problems, and a growing sense that she was losing her mind. The only difference was that she'd discovered the truth before her husband could complete whatever he'd been planning. I screenshotted everything and saved it to my secure cloud storage, then cleared my browser history. Emmett was meticulous about checking my online activity. Another red flag I'd missed, interpreting his surveillance as caring concern for my mental health. The shower was still running, so I quickly called my bank. Hi, this is Natasha Graham. I need to speak with someone about my accounts, please. It's urgent. Of course, Ms. Graham. Let me transfer you to your personal banker. Within minutes, I was speaking with Janet Holbrook, the woman who'd been managing my grandmother's estate and my inheritance. Natasha, how lovely to hear from you. How are the wedding plans coming along? Actually, that's why I'm calling, I said, keeping my voice low. I need to make some changes to my accounts. Security concerns. What kind of security concerns? I took a deep breath. I have reason to believe that my fiancé may be planning to access my accounts without permission after we're married. I need to know what protections I can put in place. There was a pause. That's a very serious accusation, Natasha. Are you certain about this? I'm certain, I said firmly. And I need to know, has anyone else been making inquiries about my accounts? Anyone claiming to represent me or asking about my financial situation? Another pause, longer this time. Actually, yes. About 3 months ago, a man called claiming to be your financial advisor. He said you'd asked him to get information about your trust fund and inheritance. We didn't give him any information, of course, but what? He knew an awful lot of personal details about you. Your grandmother's name, the approximate value of your inheritance, even your social security number. We assumed you'd given him the information yourself. My blood ran cold. Emmett had been planning this for months. What was his name? He said his name was Emmett Beckham. Said he was your fiancé and that you'd asked him to help manage your finances after the wedding. The shower had stopped running. I could hear Emmett moving around upstairs, probably getting dressed. Janet, I need you to put a complete freeze on all my accounts immediately. No one should be able to access anything without my physical presence and multiple forms of identification. Can you do that? Of course. I'll implement the highest level of security we have. But are you safe? Do you need help? I'm safe for now, I said. But I may need to move quickly when the time comes. Can you have liquid funds available if I need them? Absolutely. I'll set up a separate account that only you can access. Is there anything else? Yes. I need you to document everything we've discussed today, including the previous call from Emmett Beckham. And Janet? This conversation needs to stay completely confidential. My life may depend on it. Understood. Natasha, please be careful. I hung up just as I heard Emmett's footsteps on the stairs. Quickly, I deleted the call from my phone's history and opened a wedding planning website, making it look like I'd been browsing flower arrangements. Hey beautiful, Emmett said, appearing in the kitchen doorway looking devastatingly handsome in his charcoal gray suit. What are you looking at? Flowers for the ceremony, I said, turning the laptop screen toward him. What do you think of these roses? Emmett glanced at the screen with the kind of polite interest men usually showed when discussing wedding details. They're beautiful. Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart. I want everything to be perfect, I said, closing the laptop. This is going to be the most important day of our lives. It definitely will be, Emmett said, and I caught that gleam in his eyes again. Life-changing, you could say. He kissed me goodbye, the same tender kiss he'd given me every morning for 3 years. But now I could feel the calculation behind it, the performance of affection designed to keep me compliant and trusting. I'll see you tonight, he said. Try to have a good day, okay? Maybe call Dr. Reeves if you're still feeling anxious. I will, I promised. I love you. I love you too, he said, and the lie was so smooth, so practiced that I almost admired his skill. After Emmett left, I sat in our kitchen for a long time, staring out at the city skyline and thinking about the woman I'd been just 12 hours ago. That woman had been planning a wedding, choosing flowers, dreaming about her future with the man she loved. She'd been naive and trusting and completely unprepared for the reality of who Emmett Beckham really was. But that woman was gone now, and in her place was someone much more dangerous. Someone who understood that the only way to survive a predator was to become a better predator. I opened my laptop again and began researching Victoria Beckham, Emmett's mother and apparent partner in crime. What I found was fascinating. Victoria had been married 4 times, and 3 of her husbands had died under suspicious circumstances. Each death had left her significantly wealthier, and each investigation had concluded that the deaths were accidental or due to natural causes. The pattern was clear, and it explained where Emmett had learned his skills. Victoria Beckham was a black widow, and she'd trained her son to follow in her footsteps. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd chosen the wrong victim. My grandmother hadn't just left me money, she'd left me her intelligence, her strength, and her absolute ruthlessness when it came to protecting what was hers. Eleanor Graham had built a business empire from nothing, crushing anyone who tried to take advantage of her along the way. She taught me that sometimes the only way to deal with predators was to show them what a real predator looked like. I spent the rest of the morning making phone calls and setting plans in motion. By the time Emmett came home that evening, I had everything I needed to begin his destruction. How was your day, sweetheart? He asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind as I stood at the stove making dinner. Good, I said, leaning back against him. I had lunch with my friend Emma and did some more wedding planning. Oh, and I called Dr. Reeves like you suggested. I felt Emmett's body tense slightly. What did he say? He wants to see me tomorrow. He thinks we might need to adjust my medication again. I turned in Emmett's arms, looking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. He said the stress of wedding planning might be making my anxiety worse. That makes sense, Emmett said, his relief obvious. Dr. Reeves knows what's best for you. You should listen to him. I always do, I said. Just like I always listen to you. You two are the only people I trust completely. Emmett's smile was warm and loving and completely fake. That's because we're the only people who truly care about your well-being, Nat. Everyone else might let you down, but we never will. I know, I whispered, standing on my tiptoes to kiss him. I'm so lucky to have you both looking out for me. As we ate dinner, Emmett told me about his day at work, spinning elaborate stories about clients and meetings that I now suspected were complete fiction. I listened with rapt attention, asking questions and expressing concern about his stress levels, playing the part of the devoted fiancé to perfection. You know what? Emmett said suddenly, reaching across the table to take my hand. Let's move the wedding up. I blinked in surprise. Move it up? But we've already sent the invitations. I know, but I've been thinking. Why wait? We love each other, we're ready to start our lives together. Why not get married next month instead of waiting until December? Next month. Emmett was getting impatient, probably worried that I might start questioning things if he waited too long. Or maybe his mother was pressuring him to move faster. But the venue. I started. I'll handle everything, Emmett said firmly. Money's no object when it comes to our happiness, right? We can afford to pay the rush fees, change the catering, whatever it takes. My money, he meant. We could afford it because I was paying for everything, just like I'd been paying for our entire relationship without realizing it. If you think that's best, I said slowly as if I was considering it. I just want to be your wife. And I want you to be my wife, Emmett said, bringing my hand to his lips. Mrs. Emmett Beckham. It has such a beautiful ring to it, don't you think? It does, I agreed. Though I have to admit I'm a little nervous about changing my name. Graham is all I have left of my grandmother. Emmett's expression flickered for just a moment. Annoyance maybe, or calculation. You could hyphenate, he said carefully. Natasha Graham Beckham. That way you keep both names. Would you be okay with that? I asked. I know some men prefer their wives to take their name completely. I just want you to be happy, Emmett said, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was probably wondering if keeping the Graham name would complicate his plans somehow. You're so understanding, I said, squeezing his hand. I don't know what I did to deserve you. You were yourself, Emmett said. Sweet, trusting, generous Natasha. You have such a good heart. Such a good heart. Such an easy mark, he meant. That night, as Emmett slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and finalizing my plans. Tomorrow, I would visit Dr. Reeves and confirm what I already suspected about my medication. Then I would begin the careful process of turning Emmett's own weapons against him. He wanted to play mind games. Fine. But he was about to learn that some games have consequences he never saw coming. I thought about my grandmother, about the stories she used to tell me about the ruthless business deals she'd made, the competitors she'd destroyed, the people who'd underestimated her because she was a woman. Eleanor Graham had never let anyone take advantage of her, and she'd raised me to be just as strong. Emmett thought he was marrying a weak, broken woman who would be easy to control and eventually eliminate. Instead, he was about to marry his own destruction. The irony was almost poetic. Dr. Dawson Reeves' office was exactly what I'd expected. All leather furniture and diplomas on the walls, designed to project authority and trustworthiness. I'd been coming here for 2 years, sitting in the same chair, trusting this man with my mental health while he systematically destroyed it. Natasha, come in, Dr. Reeves said, his voice warm and professional. He was a small man with thinning hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The perfect image of a caring psychiatrist. Emmett mentioned you've been having some difficulties lately. Emmett mentioned. Of course he had. I wondered how often they spoke, how detailed their conversations were about my supposed deteriorating mental state. I have been struggling, I said, settling into the familiar chair across from his desk. The wedding stress, I think. And I've been having trouble sleeping again. Dr. Reeves nodded sympathetically, making notes in my file. That's not uncommon for brides to be. Major life changes can trigger anxiety, even positive ones. How are you feeling about the medication we discussed last time? The medication. The fake pills that Emmett had been so eager for me to take. I'm not sure they're helping, I said carefully. If anything, I feel like my anxiety has gotten worse since I started taking them. Dr. Reeves frowned, flipping through my file. Sometimes it takes time to find the right dosage. We might need to increase the strength. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse, I brought the pills with me. I was hoping you could take a look at them. They look different from what I usually get from the pharmacy. I pulled out the bottle Emmett had given me just that morning, insisting I take one before my appointment. Dr. Reeves' face went very still as I set it on his desk. Different how? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. The color is off. And they don't have the usual markings. I leaned forward, watching his face carefully. I'm probably being paranoid, but with everything that's been happening with my memory lately, I just want to make sure I'm taking the right medication. Dr. Reeves picked up the bottle and I saw his hands tremble slightly. Where did you get these? Emmett picked them up for me yesterday. He said the pharmacy was out of my usual brand, so they gave him a generic version. I tilted my head, projecting innocent confusion. Is something wrong? These aren't. Dr. Reeves started, then stopped himself. Let me call the pharmacy and check on this. There might have been a mix-up. A mix-up. I let my voice rise slightly, injecting just the right amount of panic. What kind of mix-up? Have I been taking the wrong medication? I'm sure it's nothing serious, Dr. Reeves said quickly, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Why don't you wait here while I make some calls? He left the office, taking the pill bottle with him. As soon as the door closed, I was out of my chair and moving toward his desk. I had maybe 5 minutes before he came back and I needed to see my file. The manila folder with my name on it was sitting right on top of his desk, as if he'd been reviewing it before I arrived. I flipped it open and began photographing the pages with my phone, my heart racing as I documented 2 years of lies. The notes were damning. Dr. Reeves had been tracking my deteriorating mental state in detail, noting my increasing dependence on Emmett, my memory problems, my growing isolation from friends and family. But the most chilling part was the treatment plan he'd outlined. A systematic program of psychological manipulation designed to make me completely dependent on Emmett while destroying my credibility with anyone who might try to help me. There were notes about the fake medication, about techniques for inducing paranoia and confusion, even suggestions for how Emmett could isolate me from my support system. It was a blueprint for psychological torture, written in clinical language that made it sound like legitimate treatment. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly closed the file, returning to my chair just as Dr. Reeves came back into the office. His face was pale and he was clutching the pill bottle like it might explode. Well? I asked, letting anxiety creep into my voice. What did they say? There was indeed a mix-up, Dr. Reeves said carefully. These pills aren't your medication. They're actually just vitamin supplements. Vitamin supplements? I stared at him in shock. You mean I've been taking vitamins instead of my antidepressants for the past month? It appears so. I'm so sorry, Natasha. This is a serious error on the pharmacy's part. But that explains everything, I said, my voice breaking. Why I've been feeling so much worse, why my anxiety has been through the roof. I haven't been getting any treatment at all. I know this is upsetting, Dr. Reeves said, but we can fix this. I'll write you a new prescription right now and we'll get you back on the proper medication immediately. How could this happen? I asked, tears starting to flow. Emmett specifically told them it was for my antidepressants. How could they give him the wrong pills? Sometimes these things happen, Dr. Reeves said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. The important thing is that we caught the error. I need to call Emmett, I said, reaching for my phone. He's going to be so upset. He's been so worried about me, and now we know why I've been getting worse instead of better. Actually, Dr. Reeves said quickly, maybe we should wait to tell Emmett. I'd like to get you stabilized on the correct medication first. No need to worry him unnecessarily. But he has a right to know, I protested. He's been blaming himself for not being able to help me feel better. This will be such a relief for him. Of course, Dr. Reeves said, clearly flustered. You're right. But perhaps we should discuss how to handle this situation carefully. Emmett has been under a lot of stress worrying about you. I watched Dr. Reeves squirm, enjoying every moment of his discomfort. He was trapped between his loyalty to Emmett and his need to maintain his professional facade. The fake concern in his voice was almost as nauseating as Emmett's pretend love. You're right, I said finally. Emmett has been so stressed. Maybe I should wait until I'm feeling better before I tell him about the pharmacy's mistake. I don't want him to feel guilty about something that wasn't his fault. Relief flooded Dr. Reeves' face. That's very thoughtful of you, Natasha. Very mature. I just love him so much, I said, dabbing at my eyes with a tissue. He's been taking such good care of me through all of this. I don't know what I would have done without him. Emmett is indeed very devoted to you, Dr. Reeves said, and I caught something calculating in his expression. He calls me regularly to check on your progress. It's rare to see such dedication from a partner. He calls you? I asked, feigning surprise. He never mentioned that. He doesn't want to worry you, Dr. Reeves said smoothly. He's very concerned about your well-being. In fact, he's asked me to keep him informed about any changes in your condition. That's so sweet of him, I said while internally cataloging this admission of their conspiracy. He really does think of everything. Dr. Reeves wrote me a new prescription, his hands still trembling slightly. I want you to start taking these tonight, Natasha. If you experience any unusual side effects or if your symptoms worsen, I want you to call me immediately. Day or night. Of course, I said, taking the prescription. Should I throw away the vitamin pills? Yes, definitely. And let's not mention this mix-up to anyone else, all right? These kinds of pharmacy errors can cause unnecessary panic if word gets out. I understand, I said. Our secret. As I left Dr. Reeves' office, I felt a surge of dark satisfaction. The good doctor was clearly panicking, probably already planning to call Emmett the moment I was out of the building. They would scramble to figure out how their carefully laid plans had been exposed, never suspecting that I was 3 steps ahead of them. I drove straight to a private laboratory across town, one that specialized in pharmaceutical analysis. Within an hour, I had confirmation of what I already knew. The pills Emmett had been giving me were nothing but lactose tablets, completely inert and designed to do absolutely nothing for my supposed mental health issues. But Dr. Reeves' new prescription was even more interesting. The pills he'd just prescribed were actually a powerful sedative, something that would make me drowsy, confused, and highly suggestible. If I'd actually taken them, I would have been completely at Emmett's mercy within days. I paid for rush processing on the lab results and asked for multiple copies of the analysis. Then I drove to my lawyer's office. Stephanie Hendricks had been my grandmother's attorney for 30 years, and she'd handled the estate transfer when Eleanor died. She was a sharp woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes like a hawk. If anyone could help me navigate the legal implications of what I'd discovered, it was Stephanie. Natasha, she said, rising from behind her massive mahogany desk as I was shown into her office. This is an unexpected pleasure. How are the wedding preparations going? Actually, that's why I'm here, I said, settling into the chair across from her. I need your help with something very serious. Stephanie's expression sharpened as I laid out everything I'd discovered. The voice memo, the fake medication, Dr. Reeves' involvement, Emmett's plans for my inheritance and my life. I showed her the lab results, the photos of my medical file, the documentation from my bank about Emmett's inquiries into my accounts. When I finished, Stephanie was silent for a long moment, her fingers steepled in front of her face. This is attempted murder, she said finally. Conspiracy to commit fraud, medical malpractice, possibly racketeering if this is part of a larger pattern. Natasha, you need to go to the police immediately. No, I said firmly. Not yet. What do you mean not yet? This man is planning to kill you. He's planning to kill the weak, broken woman he thinks I am, I corrected. But that woman doesn't exist anymore. And I want him to pay for more than just his plans. I want him to pay for what he's already done to me. Stephanie leaned back in her chair, studying me with new interest. What exactly are you proposing? I want to destroy him completely. His reputation, his finances, his freedom, his future. I want him to lose everything just like he planned to take everything from me. Revenge is a dangerous game, Natasha. So is attempted murder, I replied. Emmett thinks he's playing chess with a child. He has no idea he's actually playing with someone who learned strategy from Eleanor Graham. A slow smile spread across Stephanie's face. Your grandmother would be proud. She never let anyone take advantage of her either. Then you'll help me? I'll help you, Stephanie said. But we do this carefully, methodically, and legally. When we're done, Emmett Beckham won't just be in prison, he'll be completely destroyed and it will all be his own doing. We spent the next 2 hours planning my counterattack. Stephanie would quietly gather evidence and prepare legal documents while I continued to play the role of the unsuspecting fiancé. We would let Emmett dig his own grave deeper before we buried him in it. "One more thing," Stephanie said as I prepared to leave. "You mentioned Emmett's mother has a history of suspicious deaths around her husbands. I think we should look into that as well. If we can establish a pattern of behavior, it will strengthen our case considerably." "Already on it," I said, pulling out my phone to show her the research I'd compiled. "Victoria Beckham is a black widow and she trained her son well. But they picked the wrong victim this time." "Indeed they did," Stephanie said. "Be careful, Natasha. Until we're ready to move, you're still in danger. Emmett doesn't know you've discovered his plans, but if he suspects—" "He won't suspect," I said confidently. "I'm going to be the perfect trusting fiancé right up until the moment I destroy him." As I drove home, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. For the first time in 3 years, I knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of. Emmett had tried to break me, to make me weak and dependent and easy to control. Instead, he'd awakened something in me that he was completely unprepared to handle. My phone buzzed with a text from Emmett. "How did your appointment go, sweetheart? Dr. Reeves said you seemed upset when you left." Of course, Dr. Reeves had already called him. They were probably in full panic mode, trying to figure out how to handle the pharmacy mix-up without exposing their conspiracy. I typed back, "Much better now. Dr. Reeves figured out what was wrong with my medication. I should start feeling better soon." Emmett's response came immediately, "That's wonderful news. I can't wait to hear all about it. I'm making dinner reservations at Chez Laurent for tonight to celebrate." Chez Laurent, the most expensive restaurant in the city, and Emmett's go-to choice whenever he wanted to make a grand gesture. He was probably planning to propose moving the wedding up even further. Or maybe he wanted to discuss our honeymoon plans. Either way, he was clearly feeling confident about his ability to manipulate the situation. "Perfect," I texted back. "I love you so much." "I love you too, beautiful. See you tonight." As I pulled into our building's parking garage, I caught sight of my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me had the same face as the naive girl who'd fallen in love with Emmett Beckham 3 years ago, but her eyes were completely different. They were my grandmother's eyes, sharp, calculating, and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting what was mine. Emmett wanted to play games with my life. Fine. But he was about to learn that some games have consequences he never saw coming. Tonight, I would be the perfect fiancé. I would smile and laugh and hang on his every word just like I had for 3 years. But underneath the performance, I would be watching, planning, preparing for the moment when I would show Emmett Beckham exactly what happened to predators who underestimated their prey. The hunt was about to begin, and this time I was the one setting the trap. Chez Laurent buzzed with the quiet elegance of old money and whispered conversations. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in pristine white linen, while soft piano music provided the perfect backdrop for intimate dinners and life-changing conversations. It was exactly the kind of place where Emmett liked to be seen. Sophisticated, expensive, and full of people who might witness his performance as the devoted fiancé. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. A midnight blue dress that hugged my curves without being too revealing, paired with the diamond earrings Emmett had given me for my birthday. I looked like the perfect society girlfriend, polished and elegant and completely under his control. Emmett was already seated when I arrived, looking devastatingly handsome in his charcoal suit. He stood as the maitre d' led me to our table, his smile warm and loving as he pulled out my chair. "You look absolutely stunning," he said, pressing a kiss to my cheek as I sat down. "That dress is perfect on you." "Thank you," I said, letting a slight blush color my cheeks. "I wanted to look special tonight. You said we were celebrating." "We are," Emmett said, settling back into his chair. His eyes were bright with excitement, and I could practically see the wheels turning in his head. "I have some wonderful news to share with you." The waiter appeared with champagne, Dom Perignon naturally. Emmett never did anything halfway when he was trying to impress me. Or rather, when he was trying to manipulate me into compliance. "To new beginnings," Emmett said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. The champagne was perfect, crisp and effervescent, and I allowed myself to enjoy it. After all, Emmett was paying for dinner with money he'd essentially stolen from me over the past 3 years. So, I said, leaning forward with eager anticipation, what's this wonderful news? Emmett's smile widened. I've been thinking about what you said this morning about moving up the wedding. And I've decided you're absolutely right. Why should we wait? Really? I let my voice rise with excitement. You mean it? I mean it, Emmett said, reaching across the table to take my hand. In fact, I've already made some calls. We can have the ceremony 3 weeks from Saturday if you want. 3 weeks. Emmett was really pushing now, probably under pressure from his mother to accelerate their timeline. I wondered what had spooked them. Maybe they were worried that I was starting to ask too many questions, or maybe they had debts that needed to be paid sooner than expected. 3 weeks. I said, my voice breathless with apparent joy. But that's so soon. Can we really pull everything together that quickly? Money talks, sweetheart, Emmett said, squeezing my hand. I've already spoken with the venue, the caterer, the florist. Everyone's willing to accommodate us for the right price. My money, he meant. Everyone was willing to accommodate us for the right amount of my money. But the guest list, the invitations. I started. Already handled, Emmett said smoothly. I took the liberty of calling everyone on our list personally. Most people can make it work, and the ones who can't will understand. When you're in love, you don't want to wait. He'd called everyone personally, which meant he'd been planning this acceleration for a while, probably since before this morning's conversation. I wondered how long he'd been setting this up, how many pieces he'd been moving into place while I was playing the oblivious fiancé. You think of everything, I said, bringing his hand to my lips. I'm so lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one, Emmett said, his voice thick with emotion that I now knew was completely fabricated. You're going to make the most beautiful bride, Natasha. I can't wait to call you my wife. The waiter appeared to take our order, and Emmett selected for both of us without asking what I wanted. Another control tactic I'd missed for 3 years, interpreting his decisiveness as romantic rather than domineering. There is one more thing, Emmett said after the waiter left. About the prenup. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. Prenup. I know we discussed it briefly before, but my lawyer thinks it's important to have everything formalized. Just to protect both of us. Emmett's voice was carefully casual, as if he was discussing the weather rather than legal documents that would give him access to my entire fortune. I thought we decided we didn't need one, I said slowly. We trust each other completely. We do, Emmett said quickly. But my lawyer says it's standard practice for people with significant assets. It actually protects you as much as it protects me. Protects me. The irony was almost laughable. The prenup would probably be designed to give Emmett access to everything while leaving me with nothing if our marriage ended. Which, according to his voice memo, it would end with my convenient accident. What kind of protection? I asked, tilting my head with innocent curiosity. Well, for instance, if something happened to one of us, the surviving spouse would be taken care of. And it clarifies how we handle our finances during the marriage. Emmett's voice was smooth and reassuring, like a snake charmer lulling his victim into compliance. If something happened to one of us, I repeated. Like what? Oh, you know, illness, accident, that sort of thing. Nobody likes to think about it, but it's important to be prepared. Emmett's eyes were warm and concerned, as if he was genuinely worried about my well-being rather than planning my demise. That makes sense, I said finally. I want you to be taken care of if anything happens to me. And I want the same for you, Emmett said, though we both knew that wasn't part of his plan. My lawyer has already drawn up the documents. We can sign them tomorrow if you'd like. Tomorrow. He really was in a hurry now. Don't you think I should have my own lawyer look at them first? I asked. I mean, I don't really understand legal documents. Emmett's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, if that would make you feel better. Though my lawyer assures me everything is very straightforward. Standard language, nothing complicated. I'm sure it is, I said. But my grandmother always told me to have my own representation for important documents. She said it was just good business practice. Your grandmother was a smart woman, Emmett said, though I could see the frustration flickering behind his eyes. But she was dealing with much more complex business arrangements. This is just a simple marriage contract. Still, I said, letting a note of uncertainty creep into my voice, I think I'd feel more comfortable having someone explain it to me. You know how confused I get with legal stuff. Emmett's expression softened, probably because he thought my confusion was a sign of the mental deterioration he'd been working so hard to cultivate. Of course, sweetheart. Whatever makes you feel secure. Though we should move quickly. The lawyer says it's best to have everything finalized before the ceremony. I'll call Stephanie Hendricks tomorrow, I said. She handled my grandmother's estate, so she knows my financial situation. Emmett's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Stephanie Hendricks? Yes, do you know her? I've heard of her, Emmett said carefully. She has quite a reputation. Very thorough. Thorough. That was one way to describe a lawyer who'd spent 30 years protecting my grandmother from people exactly like Emmett. That's what I want, I said. Someone thorough. Someone who'll make sure I understand exactly what I'm signing. Of course, Emmett said, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was probably already planning how to handle Stephanie, how to convince her that his prenup was legitimate and in my best interests. Our dinner arrived and Emmett smoothly changed the subject to honeymoon plans. He'd apparently already booked us a villa in Tuscany. Another decision made without consulting me, another sign of his need to control every aspect of our relationship. 2 weeks in Italy, he said, his eyes gleaming. Just the two of us, no distractions, no stress. The perfect way to start our married life. 2 weeks in a foreign country, isolated from anyone who might help me if I started asking inconvenient questions. The perfect place for an accident to occur. It sounds wonderful, I said. Though I have to admit, I'm a little nervous about traveling so soon after the wedding. What if I have one of my episodes? That's why I'll be there to take care of you, Emmett said, reaching across the table to stroke my cheek. You don't need to worry about anything, Natasha. I'll handle everything. You would handle everything. Including my death, apparently. You're so good to me, I whispered, leaning into his touch. Sometimes I feel like I don't deserve you. Don't ever say that, Emmett said, his voice fierce with fake emotion. You deserve all the love in the world. You deserve to be protected and cherished and taken care of. Protected. The word tasted like poison in my mouth, but I smiled as if it was the sweetest thing I'd ever heard. I love you so much it scares me sometimes, I said, letting my voice tremble slightly. What if something happens to you? What if I lose you like I lost my grandmother? Emmett's expression shifted to one of tender concern. Nothing's going to happen to me, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. But what if it does? What if there's an accident or something? I don't think I could survive losing you too. I let tears gather in my eyes, playing the part of the fragile, dependent woman he expected me to be. Hey, Emmett said softly, moving his chair closer to mine so he could wrap his arm around my shoulders. Look at me. Nothing is going to happen to me, okay? And even if something did, you're stronger than you think. You'd survive. No, I wouldn't, I said, shaking my head. I can barely function now when you're just at work all day. If I lost you permanently. I let the sentence trail off as if the thought was too terrible to complete. Emmett's arm tightened around me and I could practically feel his satisfaction. This was exactly what he wanted to hear. Confirmation that I was completely dependent on him, that I couldn't imagine life without him. You'll never have to find out, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. I promise you that, Natasha. I will never leave you. Another lie, smooth as silk and twice as deadly. Sometimes I think about what would happen if I died first, I said quietly. I know it's morbid, but with my anxiety and depression getting worse. Don't talk like that, Emmett said sharply, then immediately softened his tone. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to snap. It's just that the thought of losing you terrifies me. I'm sorry, I said quickly. I know I shouldn't think about such dark things. It's just that Dr. Reeves said my condition might get worse before it gets better, and sometimes I worry. What did Dr. Reeves say exactly? Emmett asked, his voice carefully neutral. Just that severe depression can sometimes lead to people hurting themselves, I said, letting my voice drop to a whisper. He said I need to be very careful, especially with the wedding stress. Emmett was quiet for a moment and I could see him processing this information. Probably wondering if he could use my supposed suicidal ideation as part of his plan. That's why the prenup is so important, he said finally. If something happened to you, which it won't, I'd want to make sure your wishes were honored. Your grandmother's legacy, your charitable interests, all of it. My charitable interests. I almost laughed at the audacity of it. Emmett was already planning how to spend my money after my death, probably figuring out which charities would benefit from my estate. Charities that would likely turn out to be shell companies controlled by him and his mother. You'd really do that? I asked, looking up at him with wide, grateful eyes. You'd make sure my grandmother's legacy continued? Of course, Emmett said solemnly. It would be my honor to carry out your wishes. That's what love means, putting the other person first even after they're gone. The waiter appeared with dessert, chocolate souffle that Emmett had ordered without asking if I wanted it. As we shared the rich, decadent dessert, Emmett continued painting pictures of our future together. The house we'd buy in Connecticut, the children we'd have, the life we'd build together. It was all fiction, of course. A beautiful, elaborate lie designed to keep me compliant until he could execute his real plan. But I played along, asking questions about our imaginary future, expressing excitement about dreams that would never come true. I can't wait to start trying for a baby, I said, taking a bite of the souffle. I know we said we'd wait a year, but maybe we could start sooner? Emmett's fork paused for just a moment, so briefly that I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for his reaction. Let's see how you're feeling after the honeymoon, he said carefully. Dr. Reeves thinks it might be better to wait until your medication is fully stabilized. Of course. Can't have me getting pregnant before the accident. That would complicate things considerably. You're probably right, I said with a sigh. I just get so excited thinking about our future together. We have all the time in the world, Emmett said, stroking my hand. There's no need to rush anything. All the time in the world. If only he knew how little time he actually had left. As we left the restaurant, Emmett's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it quickly and I caught a flash of irritation across his features. Everything okay? I asked. Just work, he said, but his jaw was tight. Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow. I wondered if it was actually his mother checking on the progress of their plan. Victoria Beckham was probably getting impatient, eager to see her son complete his mission so they could move on to their next victim. You work too hard, I said, slipping my arm through his as we walked to the car. After we're married, maybe you should take some time off. We could travel, see the world together. That sounds perfect, Emmett said, though I could tell his mind was elsewhere. Absolutely perfect. As Emmett drove us home through the city streets, I stared out the window at the lights blurring past and thought about the performance I'd just given. 3 hours of playing the perfect victim, the ideal mark, the woman Emmett thought he knew so well. But underneath the act, I'd been gathering intelligence, confirming suspicions, and laying the groundwork for his destruction. Every word he'd spoken tonight had been another nail in his coffin, another piece of evidence that would ensure his complete downfall. Penny for your thoughts, Emmett said, glancing over at me as we stopped at a red light. Just thinking about how lucky I am, I said, turning to smile at him. 3 weeks from now I'll be your wife. It feels like a dream. The best dream either of us has ever had, Emmett said, bringing my hand to his lips. If only he knew that his dream was about to become his worst nightmare. As we pulled into our building's parking garage, I caught sight of a black sedan that had been following us since we left the restaurant. It pulled into a space several rows away and I watched in the side mirror as a woman got out, tall, elegant, with silver hair that caught the fluorescent lights. Victoria Beckham. Emmett's mother and partner in crime, apparently keeping tabs on our evening out. Emmett, I said softly, isn't that your mother? Emmett's head whipped around, and I saw his face go pale as he spotted Victoria walking toward the elevator. What is she doing here? I asked, injecting confusion and concern into my voice. I have no idea, Emmett said, but his hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. She didn't mention anything about coming by. Should we go say hello? I asked innocently. No, Emmett said quickly. She's probably she might be upset about something. You know how she gets. It's better if I talk to her alone first. Of course, I said, though inside I was smiling. Victoria's unexpected appearance had clearly rattled Emmett, which meant their plan wasn't going as smoothly as they'd hoped. We rode the elevator up to our penthouse in silence, Emmett's tension radiating off him in waves. As soon as we stepped into our apartment, his phone rang. It's my mother, he said, glancing at the screen. I should take this. Of course, I said. I'll just get ready for bed. I headed toward our bedroom, but I left the door cracked open so I could hear Emmett's side of the conversation. "What are you doing here?" he said, his voice low and urgent. "We agreed you wouldn't come to the apartment." There was a pause as Victoria responded. "No, everything went fine. She doesn't suspect anything." Another pause. "Yes, I told her about the prenup. She wants her own lawyer to look at it." I smiled as I heard the frustration in Emmett's voice. Victoria was clearly not happy about this development. "Stephanie Hendricks," Emmett said. I know. We'll have to be more careful." More careful. They had no idea how careful they were going to need to be. 3 weeks, Emmett continued. "Yes, I'm sure we can make it work. The honeymoon is already booked." The honeymoon where my accident was supposed to occur. "I have to go," Emmett said suddenly. "She'll get suspicious if I'm on the phone too long." I quickly moved away from the door and began getting undressed, making sure I looked like I'd been focused on my bedtime routine when Emmett came into the bedroom. "Everything okay?" I asked as he loosened his tie. "Fine," Emmett said, but his smile was strained. "Just some family drama. You know how mothers can be. Is there anything I can do to help?" I asked, moving to stand behind him and beginning to massage his shoulders. "You seem tense." "Just wedding stress," Emmett said, leaning into my touch. "Everything will be fine once we're married." "I hope so," I said softly. "I want our wedding day to be perfect." "It will be," Emmett said, turning in my arms to face me. "I promise you, Natasha. Our wedding day will be absolutely perfect." As he kissed me, I wondered if he could taste the lie on his lips. Because our wedding day would indeed be perfect, just not in the way he was expecting. It would be the day Emmett Beckham's carefully constructed world came crashing down around him. The day he learned that some prey fight back. And the day he discovered that Eleanor Graham's granddaughter was far more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. The next morning I woke to find Emmett already gone. A note on his pillow explained that he'd had an early meeting, but I suspected he was actually meeting with his mother to discuss damage control. Victoria's unexpected appearance last night had clearly spooked him. I made coffee and settled at my laptop, continuing my research into the Beckham family's dark history. What I found was even more damning than I'd expected. Victoria Beckham's first husband, Emmett's father, had died in a car accident when Emmett was 12. The insurance payout had been substantial. Her second husband had suffered a fatal heart attack just 2 years into their marriage, leaving her his entire estate. The third had drowned during their honeymoon in the Bahamas. An experienced swimmer who had somehow gotten caught in a riptide while his new wife was conveniently back at the hotel with a migraine. Each death had been investigated and ruled accidental, but the pattern was unmistakable. Victoria Beckham was a serial killer who specialized in making murder look like misfortune. And she trained her son to follow in her footsteps. My phone rang, interrupting my research. Stephanie Hendricks' name appeared on the screen. "Good morning, Natasha. I have some interesting information for you." "What did you find?" "I've been looking into Dr. Reeves' practice and it's quite illuminating. He's been involved in at least 6 cases similar to yours over the past decade. In each case he was paid by a family member to keep a patient medicated and compliant during legal proceedings. Divorces, estate disputes, that sort of thing." 6 cases, I repeated, feeling sick. "How many other women has he helped destroy?" "At least 6 that I can prove. There are probably more. The man is a predator who uses his medical license to facilitate abuse." Stephanie's voice was cold with disgust. "But here's the interesting part. In 3 of those cases, the patient died under suspicious circumstances after the legal proceedings were complete." My blood ran cold. "Died how?" "Apparent suicides mostly. 1 overdose, 1 drowning, 1 fall from a balcony. All ruled accidental or self-inflicted, but the timing was remarkably convenient for the family members who'd been paying Dr. Reeves." "Emmett's mother," I said. "She's done this before." "That's my suspicion. I think Victoria Beckham has been running this scam for years, using her son as the front man and Dr. Reeves as the medical facilitator. They target wealthy women, isolate them, drive them to the brink of mental collapse, then eliminate them once they've gained access to their assets. And I was supposed to be their next victim." "You were supposed to be," Stephanie corrected. "But you're not a victim anymore, are you?" "No," I said, feeling that cold determination settle over me again. "I'm not." "Good. Because I have a plan and it's going to require you to be very brave and very careful. Are you ready to hear it? I listened as Stephanie outlined her strategy. It was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its thoroughness. By the time she finished explaining, I was smiling for the first time in days. When do we start? I asked. Today. But first, you need to go to your appointment with Dr. Reeves and play your part perfectly. Can you do that? I can do that, I said. In fact, I'm looking forward to it. 2 hours later, I was back in Dr. Reeves' office, sitting in the same chair where I'd been systematically psychologically tortured for 2 years. But this time I was wearing a wire. How are you feeling today, Natasha? Dr. Reeves asked, his voice warm with fake concern. Much better, I said, settling back in the chair. The new medication you prescribed is already helping. Dr. Reeves' relief was palpable. I'm so glad to hear that. And how are things with Emmett? Any wedding stress? Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about, I said, leaning forward conspiratorially. Emmett told me something last night that has me a little worried. Dr. Reeves' pen paused over his notepad. What kind of something? He said you've been talking to him about my condition. Giving him updates on my progress. I let confusion creep into my voice. I thought doctor-patient confidentiality meant you couldn't discuss my treatment with anyone else. Well, Dr. Reeves said carefully, Emmett is your fiancé. He's very concerned about your well-being, and I felt it was important to keep him informed so he could provide proper support. But isn't that illegal? I asked, tilting my head innocently. I mean, I never signed anything giving you permission to discuss my medical information with Emmett. Dr. Reeves was sweating now, tiny beads of perspiration forming on his forehead. It's a gray area, he said. Given your mental state and Emmett's role as your primary caregiver. Primary caregiver? I interrupted. But I'm not incapacitated. I can make my own medical decisions. Of course you can, Dr. Reeves said quickly. I simply meant that Emmett has been very involved in your care. He's the one who brings you to appointments, picks up your medications. He picks up my medications, I repeated slowly. Like he did last week when the pharmacy gave him the wrong pills? Dr. Reeves went very still. What do you mean? The vitamin pills, I said, watching his face carefully. Remember? You said there was a mix-up at the pharmacy, and Emmett accidentally got vitamin supplements instead of my antidepressants. Yes, Dr. Reeves said, his voice barely above a whisper. The mix-up. It's just strange, I continued, because I called the pharmacy yesterday to make sure it didn't happen again. And they said they never filled a prescription for me last week. They said Emmett never came in at all. The color drained from Dr. Reeves' face. There must be some confusion. Is there? I asked, my voice hardening slightly. Because I'm starting to think there was no mix-up at all. I'm starting to think Emmett has been giving me fake pills on purpose. Natasha, you're not thinking clearly, Dr. Reeves said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used when he wanted to make me doubt myself. Your anxiety is making you paranoid. This is exactly the kind of thinking pattern we've been working to address. Why anxiety? I repeated. The anxiety that started right around the time I began seeing you. The anxiety that's gotten worse despite 2 years of treatment. Mental health treatment takes time, Dr. Reeves said. These things don't happen overnight. No, they don't, I agreed. But they also don't usually get worse when someone is receiving proper treatment. Unless, of course, they're not actually receiving treatment at all. Dr. Reeves stood up abruptly, moving toward his desk. I think we should end today's session here. You're clearly having an episode and I'm concerned about your mental state. An episode, I said, remaining seated. Is that what you call it when someone starts asking inconvenient questions? Natasha, please. You need to trust me. I'm trying to help you. Help me what? I asked, finally standing. Help me become more dependent on Emmett? Help me lose touch with reality? Help me become so unstable that no one would question it if I had an accident? Dr. Reeves' hand was hovering over his phone, probably ready to call Emmett and report that their plan was falling apart. I don't know what you think you've discovered, he said, but you're making a serious mistake. Emmett loves you. He's trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From yourself, Dr. Reeves said. From your own destructive impulses. Dasha, you're not well. You haven't been well for a long time. You're right, I said, moving closer to his desk. I haven't been well. But not because of depression or anxiety. I've been sick because you and Emmett have been poisoning me. Systematically destroying my mental health so you could steal my inheritance. That's a very serious accusation, Dr. Reeves stammered. It's also a very serious crime, I said. Medical malpractice, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted murder. How many years do you think you'll get for that, doctor? Dr. Reeves' face had gone completely white. You can't prove any of this. Can't I? I reached into my purse and pulled out the lab results from the pill analysis. These are the results from an independent laboratory. The pills Emmett has been giving me contain no active psychiatric medication. They're lactose tablets. Dr. Reeves stared at the papers as if they were a death sentence. Which in a way they were. And these, I continued, pulling out printed copies of my medical file photos, are your own notes documenting your systematic psychological manipulation of me. Very thorough record-keeping, doctor. The prosecution will appreciate your attention to detail. Where did you get those? Dr. Reeves whispered. From your desk. Yesterday while you were out of the room panicking about the fake pills. I smiled coldly. You really should lock your files away more securely. Dr. Reeves sank into his chair, his face gray with shock. What do you want? I want you to call Emmett, I said. Right now. Tell him I'm having a complete breakdown. Tell him I'm becoming paranoid and delusional, that I'm starting to question everything. Tell him you're worried I might hurt myself. Why would you want me to do that? Because I want Emmett to think his plan is working perfectly. I want him to believe I'm exactly where he wants me, broken, isolated, and ready for my final accident. Dr. Reeves stared at me with growing horror. You're setting a trap. I'm finishing what Emmett started, I corrected. He wanted to play mind games with me. Fine. But he's about to learn that some games have consequences he never saw coming. I won't do it, Dr. Reeves said, though his voice lacked conviction. Yes, you will, I said calmly. Because if you don't, I'm walking straight to the police with all of this evidence. And then I'm calling the medical board, the district attorney, and every journalist in the city who might be interested in a story about a psychiatrist who helps wealthy men murder their wives. But if I do what you're asking, if you do what I'm asking, you might have a chance to cut a deal with the prosecution. Testify against Emmett and his mother, and maybe you'll only spend 10 years in prison instead of life. Dr. Reeves was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he reached for his phone. What exactly do you want me to say? I smiled, feeling a surge of dark satisfaction. Tell him I'm getting worse. Tell him the medication isn't working, that I'm becoming increasingly unstable. Tell him you're worried I might do something drastic. Dr. Reeves dialed Emmett's number with shaking fingers. I listened as he delivered his performance, his voice perfectly calibrated to sound concerned and professional. Emmett? It's Dr. Reeves. I'm calling about Natasha. Yes, I'm afraid her condition is deteriorating rapidly. She's becoming paranoid, making wild accusations. I'm very concerned about her mental state. Yes, I think you should come get her immediately. No, I don't think she should be alone right now. When he hung up, Dr. Reeves looked at me with something approaching respect. He's on his way. Perfect, I said. Now here's what's going to happen next. I spent the next 10 minutes explaining exactly how the rest of the day would unfold. Dr. Reeves would continue to play his part, Emmett would rush to my rescue, and I would give the performance of my life as the broken, desperate woman they thought I was. And if I refused to cooperate? Dr. Reeves asked. Then you'll find out what it feels like to be on the receiving end of a systematic destruction, I said. I have enough evidence to destroy your career, your freedom, and your life. The only question is whether you want to go down with Emmett and his mother, or whether you want to help me stop them. Dr. Reeves nodded slowly. I'll cooperate. Good choice, I said. Because Emmett Beckham is about to learn that some prey fight back. And when they do, the hunter becomes the hunted. 20 minutes later, Emmett burst through Dr. Reeves' office door, his face a mask of concern and barely controlled panic. Sweetheart, he said, rushing to my side. Dr. Reeves called me. He said you were having some kind of episode. I looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes, letting tears stream down my face. Emmett, I'm so scared. I think someone's trying to hurt me. What do you mean? Emmett asked, kneeling beside my chair and taking my hands in his. The pills, I whispered. I think someone switched my pills. Dr. Reeves. I think he's been lying to me. Emmett's eyes flicked to Dr. Reeves, who was sitting behind his desk looking appropriately concerned. She's been making paranoid accusations, Dr. Reeves said, claiming that her medication has been tampered with, that I've been conspiring against her. I'm very worried about her mental state. It's not paranoid if it's true, I said, my voice rising with apparent hysteria. Someone's been gaslighting me, making me think I'm crazy. But I'm not crazy, Emmett. I'm not. Of course you're not crazy, Emmett said soothingly, though I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. This was exactly what he wanted to hear. Confirmation that I was losing my grip on reality. But what if I am? I asked, grabbing his shirt desperately. What if I really am losing my mind? What if I can't trust my own thoughts anymore? Hey, look at me, Emmett said, cupping my face in his hands. You're not losing your mind. You're just sick and we're going to get you better. I promise. But what if you can't? I whispered. What if I get so bad that I do something terrible? Emmett's eyes sharpened with interest. What kind of something terrible? I don't know, I said, shaking my head frantically. Sometimes I have these thoughts, dark thoughts, about hurting myself. What if I can't control them anymore? That's not going to happen, Emmett said firmly. I won't let it happen. I'm going to take care of you. But what if you can't watch me all the time? I asked. What if I have an episode when you're not there? What if I let the sentence trail off as if the thought was too terrible to complete. Emmett and Dr. Reeves exchanged a meaningful look, and I knew they were both thinking the same thing, that my supposed suicidal ideation would make my eventual accident much more believable. I think, Dr. Reeves said carefully, that Natasha might benefit from a more intensive treatment approach. Perhaps a residential facility where she can be monitored around the clock. No, I said quickly, panic flooding my voice. No, please. I don't want to be locked up. I just want to go home with Emmett. Of course you can come home with me, Emmett said, stroking my hair. I'll take care of you. I'll make sure you're safe. Promise? I asked, looking up at him with desperate trust. I promise, Emmett said. I will never let anything happen to you. Another lie delivered with perfect sincerity. But this time I was the one setting the trap. As Emmett helped me out of Dr. Reeves' office, I caught the doctor's eye one last time. He looked terrified, which was exactly how he should look. Because his part in this twisted game was far from over. In the car, Emmett was solicitous and caring, asking how I was feeling, whether I needed anything, if I wanted to stop for lunch. The perfect concerned fiancé, playing his role to perfection. I'm sorry I scared you, I said quietly. I know I've been acting strange lately. You don't need to apologize, Emmett said. You can't help being sick. But what if I don't get better? I asked. What if the medication doesn't work? What if I just keep getting worse until what? Until I do something we'll both regret, I whispered. Emmett reached over and squeezed my hand. That's not going to happen. I won't let it. You're so good to me, I said. I don't deserve you. Yes you do, Emmett said. You deserve all the love in the world. As we drove home through the city streets, I stared out the window and thought about how perfectly everything was falling into place. Emmett thought he was winning, thought his plan was proceeding exactly as he'd hoped. He had no idea that every word he'd spoken, every gesture he'd made, had been recorded and documented. The wire I was wearing had captured everything. His satisfaction at my apparent breakdown, his eagerness to discuss my suicidal thoughts, his promises to take care of me. Combined with the voice memo from 2 nights ago and all the other evidence Stephanie and I had gathered, it would be more than enough to destroy him completely. But I wasn't done yet. Emmett wanted to play the long game? Fine. I would give him exactly what he thought he wanted, right up until the moment I revealed that the game had changed and he was no longer the one in control. 3 weeks until our wedding. 3 weeks for Emmett to dig his own grave even deeper. And then, on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, Emmett Beckham would learn what it felt like to have his entire world collapse around him. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and I was going to enjoy every moment of his destruction. The next 2 weeks passed in a carefully orchestrated dance of deception. I played my part perfectly, the increasingly unstable fiancé whose mental health was deteriorating rapidly as our wedding approached. Emmett, meanwhile, ramped up his manipulation, becoming more controlling and possessive with each passing day. He insisted on accompanying me everywhere, claiming he was worried about my episodes. He took over all the wedding planning, making decisions without consulting me and then acting hurt when I seemed confused or upset about the changes. He even convinced me to give him power of attorney, just in case something happened, during one of my supposed breakdowns. Of course, I'd had Stephanie prepare fake documents that gave Emmett exactly nothing while appearing to give him everything. But Emmett didn't know that. As far as he was concerned, he now had complete legal control over my life and finances. "I hate that we have to do this," he said as I signed the fraudulent papers, his voice heavy with fake regret. "But Dr. Reeves thinks it's important to have safeguards in place." "I understand," I said, my hand trembling as I wrote my name. "You're just trying to protect me." "Always," Emmett said, kissing the top of my head. "I will always protect you." The irony was so thick I could taste it. Meanwhile, Stephanie had been busy building our case. She'd connected with the families of Victoria Beckham's previous victims, gathering evidence of the pattern of manipulation and murder that had been going on for decades. She'd also been working with federal investigators who were very interested in what appeared to be an interstate conspiracy involving medical fraud and multiple homicides. "We have enough evidence to put both Emmett and his mother away for life," Stephanie told me during one of our secret meetings. "But I want to catch them in the act. I want them to incriminate themselves so thoroughly that there's no possibility of escape." "How do we do that?" "We give them exactly what they want," Stephanie said with a cold smile. "We let them think their plan is working perfectly right up until the moment we spring the trap." The trap was elegant in its simplicity. On our wedding day, Emmett would finally have legal access to my inheritance. According to the voice memo I'd recorded, he and his mother were planning to stage my accident during our honeymoon in Italy. But they would never make it that far. Because our wedding was going to be attended by some very special guests. FBI agents posing as friends and family members, all equipped with recording devices and ready to document Emmett's confession when he thought he'd finally won. "The key," Stephanie explained, "is to make Emmett feel so confident, so secure in his victory, that he lets his guard down completely. We need him to admit everything on tape in front of witnesses, with no possibility of claiming it was taken out of context." "And how do we do that?" "We make him think you're already dead." The plan was audacious and dangerous, but it was also perfect. On our wedding day, I would stage a dramatic breakdown during the ceremony. I would be rushed to the hospital, where a doctor Stephanie had recruited would pronounce me dead from an apparent suicide attempt. Emmett would be devastated, of course, but also secretly triumphant. His plan had worked even better than expected. And then, when he thought he was safe, when he thought he'd gotten away with murder, we would reveal that I was very much alive and that every word he'd spoken had been recorded. "It's risky," Stephanie warned. "If Emmett suspects anything, if he realizes it's a trap." "He won't," I said confidently. "Emmett's arrogance is his weakness. He's so convinced of his own superiority that he'll never consider the possibility that I might be smarter than he is." "Your grandmother would be proud," Stephanie said. "Eleanor always said that the best revenge was letting your enemies destroy themselves." As our wedding day approached, Emmett's excitement became harder and harder to hide. He was practically vibrating with anticipation, probably counting down the hours until he could claim his prize. He'd even started being more affectionate, as if he was celebrating early. "I can't believe we're getting married tomorrow," he said the night before our wedding, pulling me close as we lay in bed. "It feels like a dream." "The best dream ever," I agreed, snuggling against his chest. "I love you so much, Emmett. I can't imagine my life without you." "You'll never have to," he said, stroking my hair. "We're going to be together forever." Forever. If only he knew how short forever was going to be. The morning of our wedding dawned bright and clear, with the kind of perfect weather that belonged in fairy tales. I stood at the window of the bridal suite, looking out at the gardens where our ceremony would take place in just a few hours. "You look beautiful," said Emma, my maid of honor and one of the few real friends I had left after Emmett's systematic isolation campaign. She was also one of the few people who knew the truth about what was really happening today. "Thank you," I said, turning to look at myself in the full-length mirror. The dress was stunning, a flowing creation of silk and lace that had cost more than most people made in a year. Emmett had insisted on the most expensive option, probably because he knew he'd be the one ultimately paying for it with my own money. "Are you ready for this?" Emma asked quietly. "I've been ready for weeks," I said. "Emmett has no idea what's coming." "Good," Emma said fiercely. "That bastard deserves everything he's going to get." As my hair and makeup were being finished, I thought about all the women who hadn't been as lucky as me. The previous victims of Emmett and Victoria's scheme, who had trusted the wrong people and paid with their lives. Today wasn't just about my revenge, it was about justice for all of them. "It's time," the wedding coordinator announced, appearing in the doorway with a bright smile. "The groom is waiting." I took a deep breath and picked up my bouquet, white roses and baby's breath, chosen by Emmett without any input from me. In a few hours, those same flowers would be lying on my supposed deathbed. The ceremony was being held in the garden of an exclusive country club, with about 100 guests in attendance. Most of them were Emmett's friends and colleagues, people who would serve as witnesses to his perfect performance as the grieving widower. But scattered throughout the crowd were Stephanie's carefully placed agents, recording everything and waiting for their cue. As I walked down the aisle on the arm of my uncle, my only remaining family member, I caught sight of Victoria Beckham sitting in the front row. She was dressed in elegant navy blue, her silver hair perfectly styled, her cold eyes watching me with what looked like satisfaction. She thought she was watching a lamb walk to slaughter. She had no idea she was watching a predator stalk her prey. Emmett stood at the altar looking devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, his face radiant with what anyone would interpret as love and joy. But I could see the calculation behind his eyes, the barely contained excitement of a man who thought he was about to claim the ultimate prize. "You look incredible," he whispered as I reached his side. "Thank you," I whispered back. "I can't wait to be your wife." The ceremony began with all the traditional pomp and circumstance. The minister spoke about love and commitment, about the sacred bond of marriage, about two souls becoming one. The irony was almost unbearable. Here we were, surrounded by symbols of eternal love, while Emmett was planning my murder. "Do you, Emmett Beckham, take Natasha Graham to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part?" "I do," Emmett said, his voice strong and clear. "Until death do us part," which in his mind would be very soon. "Do you, Natasha Graham, take Emmett Beckham to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part?" This was it. The moment I'd been building toward for weeks. I opened my mouth to say, "I do," but instead I let out a small gasp and pressed my hand to my chest. I started, then swayed slightly on my feet. "Natasha?" Emmett asked, concern flickering across his face. "Are you okay?" I gasped again, more dramatically this time. I can't breathe." I let my bouquet fall from my hands as I stumbled backward, my eyes wide with apparent panic. The guests began murmuring with concern and I heard someone call for a doctor. "Something's wrong," I whispered loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Emmett, I think I took too many pills this morning." Emmett's face went white, but not with concern, with panic. Because if I died here in front of all these witnesses before we were legally married, he would get nothing. "What pills?" he asked urgently, grabbing my arms to steady me. "The ones Dr. Reeves gave me," I said, my voice getting weaker. "For my anxiety. But I was so nervous about the wedding. I took extra." "How many?" Emmett demanded, his mask of concern slipping slightly. "I don't remember," I whispered, then collapsed to my knees on the altar steps. The garden erupted in chaos. Guests were shouting, someone was calling 911, and Emmett was kneeling beside me, his face a mask of anguish that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Stay with me, Natasha," he said loudly for the benefit of the crowd. "Don't leave me. We're supposed to get married today." "I'm sorry," I gasped, grabbing his hand. "I'm so sorry, Emmett. I love you so much." "I love you too," he said, but I could see him calculating, trying to figure out how to salvage his plan. The paramedics arrived within minutes. Actually FBI agents in disguise, but no one else knew that. They loaded me onto a stretcher while Emmett held my hand, playing the part of the devastated groom to perfection. "I'm coming with you," he announced, climbing into the ambulance. "Sir, we need space to work," one of the fake paramedics said. "I'm not leaving her," Emmett said firmly. She's my wife. We're not married yet, I whispered weakly. The ceremony, we didn't finish. We will, Emmett said, squeezing my hand. As soon as you're better, we'll finish the ceremony. I promise. But I could see in his eyes that he was already planning something else entirely. At the hospital, actually a private clinic that Stephanie had arranged, I was rushed into the emergency room while Emmett paced in the waiting area. Through the crack in the door, I could see him on his phone, probably calling his mother to update her on this unexpected development. After an hour of waiting, Dr. Marie Ryder, another of Stephanie's recruits, emerged from the treatment room with a grave expression. Mr. Beckham? She said, approaching Emmett with the kind of careful demeanor doctors used when delivering terrible news. How is she? Emmett asked, jumping to his feet. I'm very sorry, Dr. Ryder said quietly. We did everything we could, but the overdose was too severe. Miss Graham passed away about 10 minutes ago. Emmett's face went through a series of expressions, shock, grief, and then for just a moment, something that looked almost like relief. She's dead, he asked. I'm afraid so. The combination of medications in her system was lethal. I'm very sorry for your loss. Emmett sank into a chair, his head in his hands. To anyone watching, he looked like a man destroyed by grief. But I was watching from the hidden camera Stephanie had installed, and I could see the truth. Emmett was struggling not to smile. Can I see her? He asked. Of course. But I should warn you, she's been through a lot. It might be difficult. Emmett nodded and followed Dr. Ryder into the treatment room, where I lay on a hospital bed, my face pale and still, my eyes closed. The makeup artist Stephanie had hired had done an incredible job. I looked genuinely dead. I'll give you some privacy, Dr. Ryder said, leaving Emmett alone with my corpse. For a moment, Emmett just stood there staring down at me. Then slowly a smile spread across his face. You stupid trusting girl, he whispered, his voice full of contempt. You made this so much easier than I expected. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Mom? It's done. No, not the way we planned, but it's done. She overdosed at the wedding. She's dead. I know, but this might actually be better. No suspicion, no investigation. What? No, we weren't legally married yet, but I have power of attorney. Yes, I can still access everything. I lay perfectly still, barely breathing as Emmett continued his conversation with his mother. Every word was being recorded by the devices hidden throughout the room. The funeral will be in a few days, Emmett continued. I'll play the grieving fiancé, maybe even give a touching eulogy about how much I loved her. Then we can start liquidating her assets. What? Of course I'm sure she's dead. I'm looking right at her. Emmett ended the call and moved closer to my bedside. For a terrifying moment I thought he might check for a pulse or try to verify that I was actually dead. Instead he leaned down and whispered in my ear. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for being exactly as weak and pathetic as I thought you were. Your grandmother's money is going to buy me a very nice life. That was when I opened my eyes. Emmett jerked backward, his face going white with shock. What? How? Hello, Emmett, I said, sitting up on the hospital bed. Surprise. But you're dead, the doctor said. The doctor lied, I said, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. Just like you've been lying to me for 3 years. Emmett's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I don't understand. Of course you don't, I said, standing up and smoothing down my wedding dress. You never understood me at all. You thought I was weak, broken, easy to manipulate. You thought you could destroy my mind and steal my inheritance and I'd never fight back. Natasha, I don't know what you think you heard, but... I heard everything, I interrupted. Just like I heard the voice memo you accidentally sent me 3 weeks ago. The one where you told your mother all about your plan to kill me for my money. Emmett's face went from white to gray. You knew. I've known for weeks, I said. Every conversation we've had, every tender moment, every lie you've told me, I've known exactly what you were doing. But the pills, the breakdown, the suicide attempt. All fake, I said. Just like your love for me. Just like everything about you. Emmett looked around the room wildly as if searching for an escape route. You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine. Actually, I said, pulling a small recording device from my bra, I can prove everything. This conversation, the voice memo, your medical conspiracy with Dr. Reeves, it's all been recorded. That's That's illegal, Emmett stammered. So is attempted murder, I replied. So is medical fraud. So is conspiracy to commit homicide. The door opened and Stephanie walked in, followed by 2 FBI agents. Emmett Beckham, one of the agents said, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, medical fraud, and attempted homicide." As the agents read Emmett his rights and cuffed his hands behind his back, he stared at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You bitch," he snarled. "You manipulative, lying bitch." "I learned from the best," I said calmly. "You taught me everything I know about manipulation and lies. I just turned out to be a better student than you expected." "This isn't over," Emmett said as the agents led him toward the door. "My mother will." "Your mother is being arrested as we speak," Stephanie interrupted. "Along with Dr. Reeves and several other members of your little conspiracy. It's over, Emmett. All of it." As Emmett was dragged away, still shouting threats and curses, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It was finished. 3 years of manipulation, gaslighting, and psychological torture had finally come to an end. "How do you feel?" Stephanie asked. "Free," I said. "For the first time in 3 years I feel completely free." "Your grandmother would be proud," Stephanie said. "You fought back and you won." I looked down at my wedding dress, at the symbol of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it had become the day I reclaimed my power and destroyed the man who'd tried to destroy me. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Stephanie said with a smile, "you get to live your life on your own terms. No more manipulation, no more lies, no more fear. Just you, your inheritance, and whatever future you choose to build." As I walked out of the fake hospital room, still wearing my wedding dress but no longer a victim, I thought about Emmett's final words. He'd called me manipulative and lying as if those were bad things. But he was wrong. Sometimes manipulation was just another word for strategy. Sometimes lies were just another form of protection. And sometimes the only way to defeat a predator was to become a better predator. Emmett Beckham had tried to play a game with my life, thinking he held all the cards. But he'd made one crucial mistake: he'd underestimated his opponent. And now he was going to spend the rest of his life paying for that mistake. 6 months later, I sat in the gallery of a federal courthouse, watching as Emmett Beckham was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The evidence against him had been overwhelming. The voice memo, the recorded conversations, the testimony from Dr. Reeves, who had cut a deal in exchange for his cooperation, and the pattern of similar crimes involving his mother. Victoria Beckham had received the same sentence, her decades-long career as a black widow finally brought to an end. Dr. Reeves got 15 years for his role in the conspiracy, and several other accomplices were facing various charges. Emmett looked older than his 35 years as he stood before the judge, his once handsome face gaunt and hollow. When the sentence was read, he turned to scan the gallery, his eyes finding mine across the crowded courtroom. For a moment we stared at each other, the predator and the prey who had turned the tables. Then Emmett's face twisted with rage and he mouthed a single word, "Bitch." I smiled and mouthed back, "Winner." As the bailiffs led Emmett away in shackles, I felt the final piece of my healing click into place. The man who had tried to destroy me was gone forever, and I was free to build whatever life I chose. Outside the courthouse, Stephanie was waiting with a bottle of champagne. "How does it feel?" she asked as we walked toward her car. "Like justice," I said. "Finally." "Your grandmother would be so proud," Stephanie said. "Eleanor always said that the Graham women were survivors. That we didn't just endure, we conquered." "She was right," I said, thinking about the foundation I'd started with my inheritance. An organization dedicated to helping victims of domestic abuse and psychological manipulation. Emmett thought he was destroying a weak woman. Instead, he created someone much stronger. "What's next for you?" Stephanie asked. I looked up at the clear blue sky, feeling the sun warm on my face. For the first time in years, the future stretched out before me like an open road, full of possibilities I could choose for myself. "Everything," I said. "Absolutely everything." As we drove away from the courthouse, I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago. Naive, trusting, desperate to be loved. That woman was gone, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous to those who might try to take advantage of her. Emmett Beckham had set out to destroy Natasha Graham and steal her inheritance. Instead, he'd created his own nemesis. A woman who understood that sometimes the only way to survive in a world full of predators was to become the apex predator yourself. The game was over and I had won. But more importantly, I had learned that I was capable of winning. And that knowledge would serve me well for the rest of my life. Emmett had wanted to teach me about manipulation and control. Mission accomplished. I'd learned those lessons better than he'd ever imagined. The student had become the master, and the master was now exactly where he belonged. In a cage. Forever.